I am just so honored to be with you this morning. But I'm a little bit intimidated because I am in the church of whom I consider one of the greatest pastors and preachers in the United States, a real leader in our movement and a dear friend. So, I mean, that's a pretty good combination right there, right? And so I'm excited to be here. I've got a short video. Our ministry has taken a different turn because of our years in Chile and in Colombia. We have been working mainly with middle to upper middle class churches, but now we're reaching into vulnerable areas and setting up feeding centers through the churches that we have started. And God is just blessing in a special way. In particular, Colombia is a very, very volatile place right now. Just 2 weeks ago, 10 community leaders were assassinated, and 2 of those were Baptist preachers. And just about a month ago, well, in fact, just this week, a man who had an assassination attempt on his life, who was the leading candidate for president in Colombia, died, and the country is in turmoil. So please be praying for Colombia. Pray for our pastors. Pray for our feeding centers. And I've got a short 3-minute video I just want to share with you, and then I'll give the message. Now, I grew up in Fort Lauderdale in a church much like this, and we had a little saying among the young people and it went something like this: "Now I lay me down to sleep, a missionary is about to speak." Because missionaries kind of have a reputation of being long-winded and boring. And I trust that won't be the case this morning. So if you would open your Bibles to Luke chapter 12 and take a look at this 3-minute video that'll just share with you our passion and what we're asking God to do in our lives and in our ministry. That was it. I told you it was short. Yeah.
My name is Len Curtis. I've been blessed to spend my life serving God and others. For 35 years, I worked as a missionary in Chile, where I was humbled to be part of a growing community of faith. Together with many dedicated people, we established feeding centers and helped plant churches throughout Chile. For the past 7 years, I've continued to serve as a pastor in St. Petersburg, Florida. Along the way, I met someone who deeply inspired me, Diego Serrano. Diego was making a profound impact. Out of his own pocket, he provided hot meals, shared Bible teachings, and offered life lessons to children and teens from the shanty towns of Bogota, Colombia. In these neighborhoods, extreme poverty is a daily reality. Gang violence, human trafficking, and domestic abuse are all part of everyday life. Many of these children face family situations filled with abuse, neglect, and abandonment. Moved by Diego's dedication, I felt compelled to do something to help. That's how To the Least of These Ministries came into being, a mission to help local churches reach into the most vulnerable communities and become the hands and feet of Jesus. We aim to be part of a ministry that makes a meaningful impact by serving those who have the least to offer. Our goal is simple: to help you help those who need it the most. We're on a mission to rescue children from the grip of poverty, but we can't do it alone. We need you and invite you to join us in supporting these incredible children. Our partners, churches, individuals, and businesses typically support us on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis, providing for the needs of children through our feeding and life centers. And we're hopeful about expanding our efforts to start future life centers in Mexico, as well as in Ibagué y Villavicencio, Colombia. For just $30 a month, you can sponsor and support the needs of one of these children in Latin America. Whether it's covering daily meals, sponsoring the cost of education, or provided needed clothing, your support can help break the cycle of poverty for their families. Imagine the difference you can make: a hot meal, a safe place to learn, a chance at a brighter future. Will you join us? To the Least of These Ministries, because together we can make a world of difference.
And we are their only hope to know Christ, to have a life that is different. And so we pray and ask you to pray, prayerfully pray, in becoming partners with us as we seek to make an impact. At this particular time in our ministry, this was the time we decided if we're ever going to have a ministry of high impact, this is the moment when we have to step out by faith. It has been difficult, but this is what God is calling us to do. So if you would, open your Bibles to Luke chapter 12. Now, wouldn't you agree that we live in a society that promotes self-improvement, right? And this is good. And the reason this is good, and I don't have anybody in mind, but some of us, we kind of need to improve ourselves, right? I know I do. And I think this is where we become painfully aware of where we are and where we're not. What we need to start doing and what we need to stop doing. What we need to start eating more of and what we need to stop eating less of. And in many cases, it's the same stuff that we decide every year we're going to do more or less of. And I get that. I am guilty of that as well. And basically, what we're asking ourselves at every turn is, what should I do about me? And that is an important question to ask, right? I mean, what can I do to make myself stronger? What can I do to make myself slimmer? What can I do to make myself healthier or wealthier or more successful? And as a pastor/missionary, I just want to say, go for it. Man, I hope you accomplish all of those goals. I hope next year your goals are so different because you've been so radically successful this year. But this morning, I want to add a question to the mix. I want to give you a second question. And it's actually going to potentially help you in what should I do about me question. But it's a different kind of question. And I'll give you a little heads up, a little warning. This question will mess with you. It will bother you. It will make you feel guilty. It'll motivate you, and if we allow it to do its work, this is the kind of question that can focus us. It can change us. I mean, as we're going to discover in the brief few minutes that we share together this morning, this question or a similar question actually changed some people's lives. It has the potential to change, honestly, and this isn't just preacher talk. It has the potential to change the trajectory of your life. So I would suggest you kind of write it down. Put this question somewhere you can look at it often, because this is the kind of question that will make your life better and make you better at life. And of course, if you're a Christian, if you're a believer, if you're wanting to follow Jesus, this question is important for several reasons. But I think that the main reason that this question should be taken seriously is because this question, or the sentiment behind this question, the thing that fuels this question, actually threads its way through the history and the story of our faith. I'll give you a couple examples. What is the oxygen that fuels this question is the reason why Queen Esther in the 5th century, actually not a very familiar story to many people, she was the queen of Persia. She was the wife of the most powerful person in the world. And if you know the story, it's why she couldn't just stand by and do nothing when she discovered a plot to exterminate all the Jews in Persia. So she finds out about this plot, and she's the queen, but it's not like we think of queens and kings. The king had a harem. His name was King Xerxes. And as the story goes, he chose her as the queen because she was the most beautiful person he could find in the empire. But you know, kings have a lot of stuff going on. So you just didn't walk into the presence of a king and say, hey, honey, I have a question for you. In fact, there was a law that you could not enter into King Xerxes' presence without being invited. And if you did, it was the death penalty. And so she discovers this plot, and the only person who can prevent her people from being exterminated is King Xerxes. And he hasn't called on her. You should read the story. He hasn't called on her in over 30 days. And so she gathers some of her people together, and she says, hey, you guys have to pray for me. You've got to fast because I'm going in. And if he doesn't hold out his gold scepter, my life is over. But I've got to go in. And then she makes this famous statement that you've probably heard before. Maybe you didn't know where it originated. She said, and if I perish, I perish. But I just can't stand around and do nothing. And this question, and the sentiment behind this question, really is what fueled Nehemiah. One of the stories, greatest stories of leadership in ancient history, maybe ever. And one of the great things I think about the story of Nehemiah as far as we're concerned, is that in this story there are no miracles. God doesn't do anything spectacular. It's just good old-fashioned leadership and work. And as you know, Nehemiah was the cupbearer to King Artaxerxes, again of Persia. And he's got it made, right? He's got this cush job. I mean, he's living the dream. He's living in the most powerful empire in the world. He has a relationship with the most powerful man alive at that time. But he gets news that things are not going well back in Jerusalem, back where his family is from. And so he has this tension on the inside. Things are bad there, but things are good here. But I cannot unhear what I heard. And so he goes to King Artaxerxes and he asks permission to leave his service. I mean, nobody does this. I mean, you spend your whole life getting to this place. He asks permission to leave his service, to go back to Jerusalem, to do something for his people. And so he asks, why don't you just make me governor of Judea? That way I'll have the authority to go back and address the economy, to go back and address the fact that the gates have been burned down, that the walls have been torn down, that the people are depressed and distressed. The king says, you got it. Permission granted. And it's an extraordinary, extraordinary story. But the thing that caused him to leave what was comfortable for that which was uncomfortable is really behind the question that we're going to wrestle with this morning. It's again why the Apostle Paul, continuing the same narrative, it's why the Apostle Paul, he gets to Athens and he's kind of waiting around at the port of Athens and he wanders through the city, and what's behind this question is the reason he couldn't keep quiet. And so he's walking around Athens and nobody knows who he is, and he notices that there are hundreds and hundreds of altars and they're making sacrifices to hundreds, maybe thousands of gods. And this is a sophisticated city. These are sophisticated people, some of the most sophisticated people in the ancient world. And Paul's like, oh my goodness, they don't know that God has done something for them in the world. And he couldn't keep his mouth shut. He just had to do something. He had to say something. And he preaches this amazing message on Mars Hill, and almost everyone ignores him. But he's like, I just couldn't keep my mouth shut. And you know what? It's not just the ancient world that's been impacted by this question or questions like it. The modern world as well. In fact, in the modern world, it has been shaped by men and women who have refused to, this is so important, who have refused to look the other way when the answer to this question became apparent. It's why Claudio and Teresa Lopez of Santiago, Chile, Claudio, who I consider one of my Timothys in the faith, and Teresa is our adopted daughter. Tere, because of a horrific domestic background, showed up one day on my doorstep, fleeing her mother's partner who was sexually abusing her. But then she began to grow as she got involved in church, and she began to grow in the Lord, and she developed a love and passion for vulnerable children in similar circumstances. And Claudio and Teresa head up and help start our first feeding center in Santiago, Chile. The answer to this question is why we started another feeding center in Bogota, Colombia, under the supervision of another local church. We knew this pastor's son who, after working on weekends, would take part of his own salary and he'd go into some dangerous shanty towns of Bogota. He'd sit down on the sidewalks and in local parks and give some starving children hot soup and sandwiches. And then he would tell them the story of Jesus. And he did all of this out of his own pocket. And now he's on the verge of starting a church with over 100 people. And God is using him in a mighty way because he could not unsee what he had seen. And when I heard his story, I couldn't unhear it. I couldn't turn away. It was too late. So all of that to say this. As soon as I give you this question, you're going to know immediately what the answer is. And some of you are going to be so frustrated because it's like, yeah, missionary, I think about it all the time, but I don't think there's anything that I can do. And thanks for reminding me, but hey, I'd rather not think about it. It's too big. It's too complicated. I can't do anything. And I'm here to tell you that everyone can do something. Because isn't it true? Isn't it true that the people that you admire the most are not the people who just got in shape and got out of debt and went on with their lives, The folks who inspire you and amaze you are the folks who at some level had the courage to ask, answer, and act on this question. So I think it's a question that we should all ask, and we should ask it in every season of our lives. Now I just want to invite all of us to just step away from the mirror, to step off the scales, to put our phones down for just a moment and ask a better, more clarifying, albeit more terrifying question that will reveal something about you. But it has the power and the potential to catapult you beyond you in a way that you never thought possible. So here it is. Here's the question. What breaks your heart? What breaks your heart? It's a question that we should ask from time to time. What breaks your heart? And like me, to be clear, there are a lot of things that bother you. There are a lot of things that irritate you. There may be some things that offend you, maybe culturally or nationally or politically. But is there one thing that surpasses all of those other things? Is there one thing that just kind of stays with you? You kind of wish you'd never read about it. You kind of wish you'd never heard it. You kind of wish you'd never seen it. Because now you just can't get it out of your head. And it just sits there. And it's frustrating. Because you don't think there's anything you can do about it. But you live with a little bit of that tension. What breaks your heart? One day Jesus was walking along with his disciples, and someone said to him in the crowd, just blurted out, "Hey teacher, master, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." It's like, what? Why are we talking about this? I mean, apparently this guy couldn't get resolved his issue, and he's thinking maybe Jesus can help. Tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. A reasonable request. But this was not Jesus' agenda. And Jesus paused and stopped and yelled back to the man, "Hey, who appointed me to be judge or arbiter or divider over you? Hey, I'm not going to get involved in your family issues. Why are you choosing me?" And then Jesus does what Jesus does. He sees an opening, an opportunity, a teachable moment. So apparently he stops. He has everybody sit down and he begins to teach. And we don't know what the situation is. We don't know even if their father had passed away. We don't know what the details are. But Jesus quiets the crowd. And here's what he says next. This is so great. He said to them, "Take heed and beware of covetousness." In other words, be on guard against all kinds of greed. And the guy who asked the question is like, "Hey, why are we talking about greed? Hey, I just want what's coming to me. I just want what's fair." And Jesus smiles and says, "Watch out. Be on guard against all kinds of greed." Now, I just love this term for greed or covetousness. It's the term pleonexia. Pleonexia. Would you say it with me for just a moment? Pleonexia. Okay, let's do that one more time. Pleonexia. Sounds like a disease, right? Ma'am, I hate to tell you this, but I think you got pleonexia. Oh no, I think my mom had that too, okay? Is there something for it? Yeah, we got something for it, but hey, I'm so sorry. Well, it actually is a disease. That's why I love this Greek term. It's a disease of insatiableness. It's a disease of never enoughness for meanness. It's a disease of, hey, mine looks older than theirs, and so I think I should get a new one to match theirs. It's a disease of discontentment. And it's never enough that can come your way to fill that insatiable bucket of whatever we feel like it is that we have to have. It's a disease, and Jesus says you got to be on the lookout. You got to be on the watch out for it. So I'm going to ask you a question. And the answer is no, so don't pretend to be better than you are. The answer is no, but I'm going to ask it anyway, and then I'm going to tell you why. Are you on guard against pleonexia? Are you on the lookout for pleonexia? Are you on watching out for daily for greed and pleonexia? And the answer is no. And here's why the answer is no. Because we are on guard against things that we don't perceive as an actual threat. I mean, here in Florida, we wear sunscreen during the week, right? We don't walk around with bear spray unless we're on a trail and, there's a sign that says, "Beware of the bears." And we're like, "Honey, hey, we got to get some bear spray." As soon as you're aware of the threat, we go on our guard. But we don't live our lives looking out, being on guard against things that we don't perceive as a threat. And Jesus says that you should be on guard against never enoughness, pleonexia, to which I know what some of you may be thinking. Greed, hey, missionary, I've got issues, but greed, come on. And his point is that pleonexia is sinister and it's subtle. It wears multiple disguises. It disguises itself as a virtue. And you can't see it in the mirror, so we don't see it as a threat. And hey, Jesus, I'm going to push back on you for just a moment. Pleonexia, greed, that's all kind of interesting, but I don't see the threat. Hey, I've got my stuff, but I don't care what other people think. Come on, Jesus, you got to give me a little more information. Tell me, what really is at stake here? And Jesus is about to say, let me tell you what's at stake. Your life is at stake. What makes life really life is at stake. What makes life worth living is at stake. You don't realize it, but that's what's at stake. Because greed in all of its subtle forms has the potential to rob your life of meaning. Whoa, wait a minute. How in the world can greed rob my life of meaning? So catch this before you doze off for just a moment. Here's the bottom line. Because pleonexia always ensures that we are an end and never a means. And you can't experience meaningful until you are willing to be a means. So Jesus continues with his teaching. He gives them a maximum, a truism, a principle. And again, what he's about to say, you read it and we say, well, yeah, we all know that, but we forget. And here's the statement. Here's what he says. Come on. Life, the man's life, does not consist in the abundance of things which he possesses. In other words, at no point do you equate the value of your life with what you own. To which all of us would say, well, of course we don't. But Jesus is like, but yeah, look at the way you respond. Look at the way you live. You're watching out. You're guarding all the wrong things for the wrong reasons, because at the end of the day, what you own doesn't equal the valuable life of your life, no matter how many possessions you have. I mean, God forbid you ever carjacked, right? And somebody put a gun to your head and they say to you, hey, it's your life or your car. Would you pause and say, well, I don't know. I just made the last payment on that thing last month. Hey, take my watch, take my watch. No, in that moment, we know. Life and stuff, they're two completely different categories. Pleonexia and all the subtle forms of greed fools us into thinking that the opposite is true. So we live our actual lives, even though we know what Jesus said is true, as if life does consist in the abundance of possessions. And Jesus would read our minds, and he would read the minds of his audience. And so you know what he does? He launches into one of his most famous stories. He launches into a parable. Now, you know that a parable is a made-up story, right? Complete fiction. But Jesus makes up this story to prove a specific point. And I think he smiles. He knows what they're thinking. He knows how we would respond to this. And so he leans in and he tells them a parable. Now, if you've been in church very long, you've heard this before. But I want you to pretend like you've never heard it. Pretend like you're sitting around thousands of people who just trampled each other to get close to Jesus. And somebody has said, hey, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. And something else you should know, this message, the message that Jesus is delivering, is far more relevant for me and for you today than it was for his original audience. I mean, come on, the last thing they were worried about was greed. Because greed assumes that you have to have something to be greedy about. These people are hand to mouth. Give us this day our daily bread. That was a literal prayer. Bread and wine, the only things that would keep, everything else would spoil. So they're listening to this and they're thinking, greed? Are you kidding me, Jesus? I think you got the wrong audience. Well, today with me in the audience, it's the right audience. And I think with most of us in the audience, it's the right audience. And the point of this parable, it's so important, is about to show the meaning-depleting power of pleonexia. It is the power of greed to rob us while it enriches us. That's why it's so subtle. So let's close out this morning looking at this story. The ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentiful. So the rich get richer even in the first century. That's exactly what this means. Somebody who already had extra just got extra. And the man thought to himself, my goodness, look at this abundant crop. I'm already rich. I already have more than I need. Now I've got extra. And so he thought to himself, what am I going to do? It wasn't apparent to him what he should do. He saw this as a problem he had to solve. Actually, it was an opportunity, and he missed it. He didn't see it that way. And the reason he didn't see it as an opportunity, pleonexia, but he didn't know. He said, hey, I don't have any place, any room to bestow my fruits, to store all my crops. And here's the assumption. This is so important. The assumption was, since it came to me, it's for me. I call this the assumption, the consumption assumption. The consumption assumption is, if it comes my way, obviously it's for my consumption. If it ends up in my hands, it's for my consumption. If it ends up in my bank account, if it's my degree or my opportunity or my resources or my relationships, if it comes to me, well, it's for me. To be consumed when I need to consume it, or to be leveraged when I need to leverage it. It's the consumption assumption. And then he said, hey, I know what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. There I'll store all of my surplus grain or goods. He said, I'm going to save it now to consume it later. Because if it comes to me, obviously it's for me. And there you have it. A really bad case of pleonexia. He was an end, not a means to an end. If it came to him, it was for him. And then he says, because he can't see this in the mirror, none of us can, he says, I'll say to myself, soul, you have plenty of grain. And here's the other trap right here in the parable. Jesus is brilliant. You have plenty of goods laid up for many years. And there's the lie. Since I have a lot of grain, I've got a lot of life. Since I have so much provision, I must have enough time to use up the provision. Stuff equals life, and stuff equals time. I've got all the time in the world because I've got all the stuff in the world. And then I'll say to myself, just take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry. And Jesus' audience had one thing in common with us. They were envious. Right? I mean, come on, wouldn't that be great? I mean, you've got everything you need. You've got it all sorted out. You've got all the right investment accounts, all the passive income, and you're 55 years old, or you're 65 years old. And you just get up every day, just do whatever you want, no responsibility, no pressure, just live every day as you want. But this is a parable, which means Jesus has a point to make. And the point he has to make goes right to the heart of the meeting, depleting deception of greed. You know, greed will fill our schedule. It'll fill our ego. It'll fill up our relationship bucket. It might even fill up our bank accounts. And while it's filling up all of those things, it can rob us at the same time. And he said, as happy as this guy was about his future, as secure as he felt about his future, God said to him, because in a parable anything can happen, God said to the rich man, you're a fool. And everybody in Jesus' audience is going, a fool? He's no fool. I'd like to be that kind of a fool. What do you mean he's a fool? How could he be a fool? He was actually wise. He was responsible. He was smart enough to become wealthy, and then he became wealthier. How could he be a fool? He was wise, not a fool. And Jesus says no. And here's why Jesus says no, and this is for you, and this is for me. Because the man in the parable made the mistake of presuming on the future. You know what that means? That means I've got so much stuff. I must have so much time. To presume on the future is to presume time you don't know that you have. To presume opportunities that you may never get. It's to assume opportunities to do good later. You know, once I'm an adult, once I get to my 40s, once I get to my 50s, once the kids are out of the house, once we have everything paid for, once we, then I'm going to take care of that opportunity to do something beyond myself. And Jesus says, you're a fool. You don't know what the future holds. You don't even know what today holds. He was a fool not because of what he owned. He was a fool because he was owned by what he owned. And he wasn't on guard against the subtle realities of pleonexia. And God said to him, this very night, your soul will be required of you. No, come on, that's not possible. Haven't you seen how much grain I have? Haven't you seen how much stuff I have yet to consume? Doesn't more stuff equal more life? Of course it doesn't. God says this very night, your soul will be demanded of you. Then who will get, paraphrase, what you have prepared for yourself? Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? And it's like, I know the answer to that. Someone else. But not because he was generous. Next one, please. Next one. Not because he was generous, but because he was dead. And then the punchline, the punch in the gut line for me, the wake-up call. And this is why you have to discover something outside of you that breaks your heart. This is why we can't get locked into the consumption assumption. And it's so easy for us because of where we live and what we have in the era of human history in which we live. This is why you got to find a way to devote at least a piece of yourself to something beyond you. Otherwise, we fall into this trap. And then Jesus just leaves the parable. He just ends the parable right there. He pulls out of the parable. He addresses us directly. He addresses his audience directly. And what he says, this is so convicting and yet so inspiring if we take it the right way. He says, so is he. Follow along in your Bibles. Verse 23. So is he. In other words, this is how it will be. How will it be? It's total loss. He lost his stuff. He lost his life. He lost his opportunity. He lost everything. There's nothing to show for him because it was all about him. Because he wasn't on guard against pleonexia. He lost everything. This is how it will be for whoever lays up treasure for himself to be consumed on himself. This is how it will be for people who are not rich towards God. Do you know what it means to be rich towards God? It's becoming a means to an end that doesn't end with you. That's what gives your life meaning. No strings attached giving. No strings attached serving. No strings attached supporting. But if we're not careful, greed will rob us of that opportunity. So wrapping up and circling back around, here's the code. Here's the password. Here's what it means to have a meaningful life. And I've said it several times. It's becoming a means to an end that doesn't end with you. That's what makes something meaningful. That's where purpose is found. That's where happiness is found. That's where joy is found. And that's the invitation for all of us. So going back to Jesus' words, be on your guard against pleonexia, become a means to an end that doesn't end with you. And Jesus, throughout this parable, his teaching, is saying, hey, I told you what to do. Don't be greedy with your life. Don't be greedy with your time. Don't be greedy with your resources. Don't be greedy with your influence or your experience. Choose something that doesn't directly benefit you and then commit part of your life to it. And I think Jesus would say, and you better hurry, because your opportunity is slipping away. And yes, it may cost you. And resist and you may live, at least for a while. And dying in your beds many years from now, would you not be willing to trade all of the days from this day to that to come back here and to tell your enemy, you may take my life, but you will never take my meaning? Because meaning is always found right across the border from what's in it for me. So one more time. What breaks your heart? What breaks your heart? What needs to change? Carve off a piece of you and invest in it. And you're 30, you're 40, you're 50, you're 70 years old, and you're saying, hey, when the grandkids are gone, one day, you're presuming on a future that you may not have. And Jesus is inviting you right now. It doesn't have to be earth-changing, but carve off a piece of your life and allow it to become a means to an end that doesn't end with you. That's how you find a meaningful life. So what breaks your heart? And if nothing breaks your heart, then you've got some work to do. Don't succumb to pleonexia. Don't miss the opportunity of a lifetime, the opportunity to make a difference in this world, but for sure, to make a difference in someone's world. And in the end, the value of a life is always measured by how much of it is given away. And you know that. And I know that. And what breaks your heart is your opportunity to leverage that while you still have the opportunity to do so. So in the meantime, get in shape. Diet. Exercise. Get out of debt. Secure your financial retirement. Keep working on you. And here's why you should keep working on you. Because you should be the best version of you that you possibly can be in order to be a means to an end that doesn't end with you. And when you are willing to position yourself to become a means to an end that doesn't end with you, you experience life that is truly life. So what breaks your heart? What breaks your heart? What breaks your heart? For us, it's impoverished kids who have no hope and who will have no life or possibility of knowing Christ unless we intervene. But what breaks your heart? Let's stand.